Can you still remember the uneasy silence that hung in the air as we watched the news that day? The reports were relentless. Nations bristling with tension, leaders trading veiled threats, and alliances shifting in ways that reminded of history books on the lead up to the world wars. It wasn't just the headlines. It was the feeling, the undercurrent of something inevitable, something larger than any of us. It's like watching storm clouds gather on the horizon, knowing they'll break eventually, but not knowing when or how devastating the storm will be. The world, it seems, is edging closer to a precipice, with each passing year marked by territorial disputes, cyber attacks, proxy wars, and the rise of new global powers. You sense the unease in conversations, the suspicion in diplomacy, and the arms races quietly ramping up behind the scenes. Some say it's paranoia, others call it realism, but deep down, you know we've seen this before. The echoes of history are loud, and if you listen carefully, they're warning us of what may come. A third world war, one that might just be inevitable. But how did we get here? And why does this possibility feel more real than ever? To understand why World War III feels like more than just a distant fear, we must first look at the patterns that have defined humanity's darkest moments. The lead up to every great conflict has been marked by an eerie familiarity. Rival powers jockeying for dominance, fragile alliances fracturing under pressure, and ideologies clashing in ways that leave little room for compromise. The world today, in many ways, mirrors those times. Take, for instance, the rivalry between the United States and China. It's not just about economics or military might. It's about two vastly different visions for the future of the world. One is rooted in liberal democracy and the preservation of the current world order. The other seeks to redefine that order entirely. The tension over Taiwan, trade wars, and the battle for technological supremacy have created a powder keg, and all it would take is a spark to ignite it. And then there's Russia, with its unapologetic resurgence on the global stage. The war in Ukraine has reminded us that the lessons of history are never fully learned. As NATO expands and Russia pushes back, the possibility of a direct confrontation between nuclear-armed states looms uncomfortably close. Add to this the simmering unrest in the Middle East, the South China Sea disputes, and the shadowy world of cyber warfare, and it's easy to see why the stakes have never been higher. But it's not just geopolitics that makes World War III feel inevitable. It's the human element. Fear, ambition, and the quest for power have always driven nations to war. Combine these timeless motivations with the unprecedented pace of technological advancement, and you have a recipe for disaster. Autonomous drones, AI-controlled weapons, and cyber attacks on critical infrastructure mean that the next war could start and escalate before humans even have a chance to intervene. The stage is set, and the players are in motion. Across the globe, the signs are unmistakable. Countries are bolstering their military budgets, modernizing their arsenals, and forging alliances not out of trust but out of necessity. Economic and political fractures are becoming fault lines that could crack open under the weight of the next crisis. We've entered an era where conflict no longer follows conventional rules. It evolves, adapts, and spreads like wildfire in ways that are difficult to predict and even harder to control. Let's not forget the impact of regional flashpoints, those volatile corners of the world where even the smallest miscalculation could spiral into a global catastrophe. In the South China Sea, China's expansionist policies and island building have drawn the ire of nations dependent on free trade through those waters. Taiwan, a democratic island that China sees as a breakaway province, remains a flashpoint that could drag the United States and its allies into a devastating confrontation. In the Middle East, tensions between Iran and Israel simmer just below boiling point, with proxy wars in Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen feeding the flames. Add to that the ever-present threat of North Korea, armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons and rhetoric to match, and you have a world precariously balanced on a knife's edge. The tools of war are evolving just as rapidly. Unlike the wars of the past, the next global conflict will likely involve battles fought not only on land, sea, and air but also in cyberspace and outer space. Cyber attacks on power grids, financial systems, and communications networks could cripple nations before a single bullet is fired. Satellites, essential for everything from navigation to surveillance, could become prime targets, turning space into a battlefield. Yet, perhaps the most dangerous element of all is human nature itself. Leaders driven by pride, fear, or miscalculation can set events in motion that spiral out of their control. History is littered with examples of wars that began not because anyone wanted them, but because no one knew how to stop them. The question we face now is whether humanity has learned enough from its past to avoid repeating its mistakes, or whether we're doomed to let history play out once again. So as we look toward the future, the signs are clear, the warnings unmistakable. The storm clouds are gathering, and the thunder is already rumbling in the distance. The only question that remains is, will we find a way to change course, or are we already too late?